Hello, Pastor. I just want to talk. Hang on a minute. Let me take this off. Aren't you tired of these masks? You know, I think it's time that we unmask something in the church. It's finances. I think that's one topic that every pastor needs to talk about, wants to talk about, and needs an answer to. I believe what we have for you today is something you can get your teeth into. It's simple and it works. It's tried, true, and tested. And I hope you'll give me just a few minutes to tell you what we found that works in our churches in Texas that will work just for you as well. One of the most difficult subjects in the church is finances. Money, though, is required for us to fulfill our calling. I think you'd agree. Money also keeps us up at night. We look at our weekly attendance, we compare it to giving, and the numbers just don't add up. That's why we developed the all-in process. This system was developed to increase serving, commitment, and tithing in your church. The endorsements that you're going to hear today are real, and the data is proven. I'd like to spend the next few moments helping you to discover how God can increase giving in your church by 40% or more. In my 24 years of pioneering and pastoring a church in Texas and many churches as well, I experienced the same issue that you have. We always seem to have more vision than provision. The enemy of growth in the local church is most often a lack of resources. How many times have you sat in a staff meeting and thought, we can't do a certain project because we don't have the money? If every professing Christian in American church would tithe, the church could raise $430 billion annually. It's estimated that eradicating world hunger would cost $20 billion. In addition to that, U.S. homelessness could be eliminated with $30 billion. That would leave $380 billion for the church to meet other needs in the community. And the best part is God gets the glory. Unfortunately, only 4% of professing Christians tithe. When a church doesn't tithe, it loses its ability to respond to the problem in the culture, leaving the church basically impotent. We can't hire the right staff, we can't do effective outreach, and we can't support those most in need. A church without resources leads to a lack of influence and lack of ability to make a difference in the community. At the end of the day, we're starting to realize that we just don't have enough provision for the vision. Let's face it, while we preach that we are ambassadors of the King of Kings, churches tend to give and live at the level of a pauper. Now I want to challenge you to close your eyes for just a minute and imagine a world where 100% of your members tithe each week faithfully. We would see committed, mature followers. We would see a financial abundance for the kingdom work and greater impact in our community, healthy growth and resources to deploy in helping those who need us the most. You now have the time to focus on your calling, and you can rest easy knowing that you have the resources necessary to fulfill the Great Commission. Every successful military campaign is successful because the supply line is continued, guarded, and kept intact throughout the battle. When we restore the tithe, the church is positioned for victory. The supply line is flowing. So when a need arises, the church can step in and be the solution. This leads to influence, and it also leads to impact. It leads to a thriving, relevant, and producing church, whether it has the ability to meet corporately or not. Through this COVID pandemic, we have experienced the challenge of staying functional and resourced without gathering. When a culture of generosity, which includes tithing, is implemented, the weekly offering isn't tied to attendance. In other words, people continue to contribute even when they don't attend services. During times of crisis when the church is unable to meet, the church members continue to tithe because of their commitment to the vision. COVID-19 has drained so many churches financially. Some have even shut down. But imagine if your church finances grew over the last 6 months. In churches that have implemented this framework that we're going to explain to you, that's exactly what's happened. You'll hear from some of those pastors in just a minute. The framework is simple, and I want to give you just a little bit of it. Number one, we identify who is with you, committed givers. This will be your core. Number two, the senior pastor and a leader from our team will have small group meetings with this core group of leaders teaching the principle of Test Me and establishing the infrastructure, preparing for growth. 3, form and schedule a 5-week teaching on the Test Me strategy. This will include the following: a 5-week sermon series, 5 weeks of small groups for your entire church where the message is reinforced and you're saturating the congregation. The pastor should share notes out of the Test Me book. These groups run parallel to the sermon series. 4, integrate the new culture, all into the new members class to ensure that new people get the same truth. Now I'd like to have you listen to a few pastors who've experienced the Test Me growth and the all-in process. Listen to these guys.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Steve and I'm the lead pastor at the Rock Church over in Seguin, Texas. And what I like to do is just take a few moments to share with you my experience with the book Test Me by Pastor G.F. Watkins. You see, initially when I got my hands on this book, I read it and I loved it, honestly. And as I went through this teaching, I began to think about how it would be perceived in my congregation. Because the truth is, for me personally, talking about finances, talking about money just wasn't my thing. You know, when we begin to talk about those types of things, what I find is people get offended. They begin to think that the church is all about money. And so I was kind of skeptical about introducing this to our congregation. So as our team began the thought process of how we were going to implement this strategy, one of the things we talked about is how do we have the maximum impact? And so what we decided to do as a team was to send this curriculum through every one of our small groups. So for instance, if we had a small group, let's say in worship, our worship team, we intentionally had our worship team go through the same curriculum. Our media team went through the same curriculum, and every other small group in the church, we were all on the same page. And the reason I say that is because many times we read a book and we try to implement it, but we have no strategy. So after a few weeks, we went back and we wanted to know what kind of impact this curriculum had for us. And the truth is, my mind was blown away. I couldn't help but text Pastor GF immediately to show him the results. You know, and so what we noticed and what we experienced in our church, we experienced a 94% increase in giving in our offering on a weekly basis, which for us it was huge because at the time we were a small church. And if you know anything about ministry, you know that it takes money to fulfill the plan and the purpose that God has for your ministry. And so it allowed us to take ministry to a whole new level. It allowed us to quit being a mobile church and to go into a facility and finally have our own home. It allowed us to reach our community. It allowed us to rent the wave pool in our local community and see 1,500 people come in and lives transformed, baptisms and salvations. And I tell you what, if you're skeptical about this book, if you're skeptical about the material, I challenge you, Pastor, to really implement a strategy with this curriculum and watch how it impacts your ministry.
Hi guys, this is Jose Lopez from Powerhouse Peru. We have a copy of Test Me in Spanish that we've applied in our church. We've seen growth of over 20%. Now for most of you, you think, well, that's not a lot of growth, but let me tell you, from a church that came from a poverty mentality, that came from a way where giving was just such a struggle, to a way where they're now increasing their giving, it's a step and it's continuing to grow. One of the things I've learned in Test Me is we can actually put God to the test in this area of finances. And I just want to challenge you, this is a great resource for your people, your church, or anyone else that wants to read it personally.
I want to take just a minute to encourage you to pick up my friend G.F. Watkins' brand new book, Test Me. Really an exposition on the book of Malachi, which the reason why I did the foreword to it was because after I looked through it, I knew that if people could get a hold of these principles, I knew that there were particular keys here in this book that if they can be applied in your personal life as well as collectively in the churches, this is going to open up a whole new mindset of being blessed to be a blessing.
What did you think about that, Pastor? These are real life pastors just like you that have began the process of getting their whole church to be all in. And one of the ways that we do that, or the main way we do that, is with a book that we wrote. It's called Test Me. This is based on the book of Malachi in your Bible. There's only 4 chapters. And what we do is we just go through that and show how God wants to be honored. And when we begin this process, it'll open your eyes and open the people's eyes into what giving actually does for them, their families, and the church. So we want you to understand this book is part of the process called Test Me. Remember, it's the only place in the Bible where God commands us to test Him. He gives us that out. He said, if you don't believe me, test me. This book has several endorsements, and John Bevere is one of the biggest on it. You'll really enjoy seeing what John Bevere says about our book, Test Me. Inside the book, what we've done is we've prepared each chapter to talk about the concept of giving and receiving and honoring. And so the life group will go through the process each week after you've preached it, and they will have an illustration. And I want to give you one of the illustrations in the 8 chapters. It's a very simple one, just so that you'll understand that the book was written for the layman to teach in a small group setting. That's the way you saturate your congregation with this truth that it's more blessed to give than to receive. There's no hard pitch, no hard sell. It's simply the truth. We don't even talk about offering. We just talk about the tithe. I think that you'll be blessed by this. Let me give you an illustration. If you're sitting on a chair right now, how many legs does that chair have? Obviously, it has 4 legs. Do you know that before that chair was created or crafted, that it was an idea in somebody's mind, a furniture maker, a carpenter, somebody's mind? That was the blueprint. And they built that chair with 4 legs to distribute our weight. So that when you sit in that chair, you can eat, you can study, whatever you're doing, you can do it in confidence, not worrying about falling down. Because you're not worried about falling down now. The chairs in your congregation, people aren't worried about falling down listening to you. So it serves its purpose. Well, let's take this for example. What if that chair only had 1 leg? Pretend the chair you're sitting in, take 3 legs away, put 1 leg in the middle, and try to sit on that while you're listening to me talk. What would you be thinking about? It sure wouldn't be me. You'd be thinking about balancing. Can you imagine trying to eat a bowl of soup with 1 leg? Well, what is the illustration there? The church was created by God. Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. He built it on believers. And He said, believers will give me 10%, the first and the best 10%. It's called the tithe. And upon that rock I'll build the church. And I'll take over the world on 10% of 100% of what I give you. So really what's happening today with only 4% of all professing Christians tithing, you and I are trying to run a church with 96% of the people not participating. That's like having a chair with 1 leg when it was designed to have 4. Very simple illustrations like that. Many other illustrations are in each chapter. Your home group leaders can live this and read it and get the people to respond to them. It's very simple, and that I think the simplicity is what makes it produce 25, 40, or 50% return for these churches that are now seeing the tithe come in like it should have. Hope that makes sense to you. And remember, in a few minutes, we're going to have a little button at the end of the bottom of the screen for you to touch, where you can set up a time where you and I can talk one-on-one, and I can answer any more of those questions. So now it's really back in your court, Pastor. What are you going to do? You got really 2 choices. 1, nothing and everything goes back to the way it was. Or 2, you can give this a shot. We're not here trying to make money. We're not here trying to take anything from you. We're trying to give everything. And remember, when the process is over, the people that you have, they continue to tithe to you. The tithe doesn't go to us or anyone else. The tithe goes to the storehouse. That's the local church. I want to ask you to do this. Punch the button at the bottom of your screen. Get on the line with Kim, who is our assistant, and set up a time where you and I can have a one-on-one conversation. You can ask me any questions that you want to. We can talk about that. We can talk about, one of the things that we're known for, and the Genesis team, which you've seen behind me, is men's ministry. We can talk about the ranch that we're filming all this from if you want to. But what I'd like to talk to you about is how to get finances flowing again in your church without a gimmick. Just going to the Bible and doing what God asks us to do in the book of Malachi. When you register for that, I'm going to send you a copy. It's free because I want you to see what we're talking about. And that will go out as soon as you register to talk with me one-on-one. Again, you won't talk to somebody else, you're going to talk to me. And I would like to sit down and just explain to you how we did it and how other churches in our organization have done it, and then how we can help you to increase your tithe by 40%. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Now, I look forward this week to talking with you. May the Lord richly bless you.